Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for a community forum on the draft recommendations from our community-led committee. Oh, if everybody can mute themselves if they're not speaking. On the draft recommendations from our community-led committees on police reform and racial equity. My name is Sarah Henry. I'm the city's public information officer, and I'm here to help with tonight's Zoom meeting. Please note that all participants have been muted. To ask a question or share your feedback, please enter it into the chat at any time. We'll have a Q&A after we hear a presentation from our committee members. We'd like to hear from as many of you as possible in the time that we have available. We'd like to end at 8 o'clock tonight, but we can continue to 8:30 p.m. if needed. Please limit your comments to around a paragraph. We also urge you to share more detailed feedback on the community survey, and we'll post a link in the chat so that you have that available. We want to remind everyone that all comments must be respectful. We also want to note that we do not have members of the police department here to speak tonight. However, at the next city council meeting on February 2nd, the police chief will be providing an update on police activity, and public comment is welcome. We're streaming this meeting live on Facebook, and after the meeting, we'll post a recording on the city's YouTube page and the city's website. Before I turn things over to the community-led steering committee for introductions, let me ask City Manager Eric Levitt to say a few words.
First, thanks, Sarah, I appreciate it. I want to let everyone know that I believe several city council members and Mayor Ezzy Ashcraft are online either here or on Facebook Live, also watching and observing your comments because they're very interested. This process has started because we're interested in getting all of your feedback in how we move forward with policing in the city of Alameda. I want to also thank all of the volunteers that have been working on these committees. They've been working very hard and have brought a lot of good perspective. And I want to thank them each for all of their hard work and time in contributing to the community. And finally, I want to thank each of you that are here to attend, to ask questions, to comment, and to listen to the dialogue for your time tonight on Friday night, listening and participating in this process. We'll be continuing forward, and then the final the recommendations will be presented to council from the committees will be forwarded to the city council on March 16th. Thank you, and thank you everyone, and hopefully this is a successful night. Thank you.
I was muted. Thank you, Eric. Now I'd like to turn things over to our steering committee.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Christine Chilcott, a member of the steering committee, along with Al Mance, Jolene Wright, and Cheryl Taylor from the steering committee. I'll try to turn myself up a little bit. And along with many members of our subcommittee. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we can get started. So, as we all know, policing looks different for different people in America, and sadly, these are pictures taken just in the past little bit. The picture on the left is from the Capitol storming riot 2 weeks ago, and largely a group of white people rioting through the Capitol in DC. And as we know, not many people were arrested that day. In fact, some are taking selfies with the cops, which is not typical if you are Black or a person of color in America. On the right, you see a picture from a Black Lives Matter demonstration, which have been largely peaceful demonstrations that have turned riotous due to counter-protesters and overactive police activity. So thank you for joining us with the Alameda Police Reforms and Racial Equity Steering Committee tonight to present to you. We are doing a series of presentations, and we will show you at the end who we have presented to and who we will be if you wish to join another one of these presentations. So I want to let you know about our approach to this work, the steering committee, as well as the subcommittees. So we're committed to reforming all the way that policing is done in Alameda, but we want to do this in a collaborative way. So we understand that the community Policing is important to all members of our community, and we wish to have Alameda PD at the table, which they have been, but we believe that policing done by Alameda Police in this city can definitely be improved so that everyone who lives, visits, is a part of this community, feels safe, secure, and respected by the police. So how we were chosen, the steering committee, the 4 members I've mentioned, including myself, we were appointed in late August. In addition to the steering committee, which is sort of the guiding board of this work, we have 5 different subcommittees, which involve 60 members of the Alameda community, and they were chosen in September 2020. So a lot of work has been done in our subcommittees. We went through a variety of processes to choose the members from the subcommittees, because we had over 250 responses for people that wanted to be on these 5 subcommittees. So some people gave us very detailed history as to why they wanted to be. Some people we had to do a little digging to find more information on, but it was important that we chose a variety of people that brought a variety of viewpoints and voices to this work. It was not all, we love the police or all I hate. It was actually, we tried very hard to get a wide view so that we could have constructive conversation and dig deep research-wise into how we wish to proceed with this work. So it is, as we say, with the exception of a few, we do have an active police member that is not in the city of Alameda. And we also have a retired APD member as part of this work, but with few exceptions, the group is largely made up of people that do not have experience in policing, but bring different viewpoints from a variety of different ways. It's also important to note that we were looking for a lot of people of color, specifically Black people, to be on this committee so that we could hear the voices of those most impacted negatively by policing. So we have 5 subcommittees, and the committee's topics are the following: the unbundling services currently delivered by the police department. So other people know that as defund the police, but it really is an unbundling of services that don't need to lay within the police department. A review of police department policies and practices, police department accountability and oversight, a review of laws that criminalize survival, and the systematic and community racism and anti-racism. And that specifically, it touches on the police, but it's also looking at Alameda in a broader respect as well. So our work process, the steering committee meets every Sunday, as we have been for the last several months, for at least 1 to 2 hours. We also occasionally meet during the weekday if we need to. And our subcommittees meet with us as necessary, excuse me. We've met a handful of times as a full group to start the work and then to have touch points so we all make sure that we all know what committees meet weekly as well for a couple of hours. My internet's saying it's unstable, so if you can't hear me, let me know. Or a subcommittee member or steering committee member take over. So everyone meets regularly, not only to do the work, but so that moving ahead with the work, and also to make sure that we are refocusing and really hitting the goals that we have set for ourselves. So it's
Christine,
again,
so I'm sorry to
yes.
interrupt. You did cut out
Yeah,
there
I
a
did
little
cut
bit.
out.
So I don't know if you want to go back like 60 seconds or something.
Okay, I'm gonna go from where I think I may have cut out. So the steering committees meets regularly, the subcommittees meet regularly. This is weekly for a good hour or 2 or longer. And the chairs join the steering committee occasionally so that we can all make sure that we are on the same page with where we hope for the work to be going. So I think that was the gist of what I was aiming for. And so what you're going to see tonight are early recommendations by the subcommittees. So we want you to know that all of this work is ongoing. These are recommendations that we have pulled from different subcommittees that are thematic. So what that means is at least 2 or more committees had themes running through them that are sort of overarching areas that we thought that we should share with you. This is by no means the end all be all of this, and we would like to emphasize that this work, this is the beginning. It is not the end, nor is this finite the only areas we will discuss. So again, it's an ongoing process, but this is where we are so far, and these are some overarching themes that are running through the committees. And I'm going to turn it over to my steering committee member, Al Mance, and he will be sharing with you some of these themes. And then at the end of each of these themes, I believe you will be given a poll to do a quick vote on how you feel about these, the themes that we have pulled out. So Al, turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Christine, and thanks everyone for being here. This is a great opportunity. This process is a public process, possibly the most important aspect of improving community police relations is to increase the interaction between the exchange of ideas between the police department and the community. Police have very special, very special, very extreme powers, and they get these powers as a result of sort of a compact that they enter with the community that says, in exchange for carrying forward the values of this community, we will give you these powers to enforce these values. And one of the things that often happens, there's sort of a nationwide model of policing that doesn't necessarily fit a community. And Alameda is such a close-knit community that I believe it is possible. We believe that it's possible to have the values of the police department match up with the values of the community. And I don't mean to say that that's something that doesn't exist already. This police force is very involved with the community, especially compared to some other police forces, but there's definitely room for improvement. And many of our ideas are pointed in that direction. The first one is to create a police accountability department and a citizens police oversight committee. And these would be, the purpose of these is to hold APD accountable for adherence to good police practices. And those practices are not only the practices as taught in the academy, but also what our community believes are good police practices. The task force would work to ensure that qualitative data, that good data on police-civilian interactions is documented and exists, and it is available to the public. And we also want to ask that the city conduct a further analysis on the effects of fines and fees on poor folks and folks of color, because that's something that oftentimes is not necessarily on purpose, but has been something that is a hindrance to people enjoying a healthy lifestyle in this city as well as other cities. At this point, I guess we've got the survey question below for you to enter your opinions on what you think about these suggestions. So I'm going to go pause for a moment and give you a chance to answer that question.
So I just put up the poll question. I think everybody should be able to see it. It says, do you think this recommendation number 1 is generally on the right track? So please vote yes, you strongly agree it's on the right track. Yes, you somewhat agree it's on the right track. If you're neutral, if you somewhat disagree that it is on the right track, and if you strongly disagree that it is on the wrong track. So go ahead and vote now. We'll give it 5 more seconds to enter in your votes. I've seen it. I see about half of you have voted. If you haven't voted yet, please lock in your votes. And I will end now and share the results. So you can see most folks said that they strongly agree this is on the right track. And second most was that they somewhat agree it's on the right track. So it looks like this one is headed on the right track according to this group tonight. And I'm going to stop sharing and we'll do that again for the next one, Al.
All right. And the second is that a police oversight board be created, and that oversight board let's see if I can, be written into the city charter. Alameda wouldn't be the first city to have a police oversight board. They are fairly common throughout the country. So we have models to look at. And what we've seen is that in the places where boards are not written into the charter, they can be made ineffectual pretty quickly, depending on what the political will of the city is, and whether or not people are opposed to it. So our recommendation is that a police oversight board be written into the city charter, be made a part of the city charter, because that's the only way to ensure accountability. And with that, I'll give you just a few moments to share your opinions on that with your vote.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me go to the second polling question. All right, here we are. Recommendation 2, what's on the screen now, a police oversight board. Do you think recommendation 2 is generally on the right track? Strongly agree, somewhat agree, neutral, somewhat disagree, strongly disagree. And you guys are getting a little better at it this time. More of you have weighed in. We'll give it 5 more seconds. And I'll go ahead and end the polling now and share the results. And again, strongly agree has the most votes from this crowd, and somewhat agree has the second most. So I will stop sharing and turn it back to you.
And just briefly, someone had asked if we can read the actual recommendations. They're actually pretty extensive. They're on the city's website, and I believe that Ms. Henry put them in a link as well, so that you can go directly to there just by following the link. But many of them, they're far more extensive than this, so it's just not possible in this short time that we have to put the whole thing up on the or to read it out loud. Okay, can we move to number 3, please?
I'm working on it. Freezing for a second.
No worries.
There we go.
All right. So the third recommendation, and these are, this is a sample, sort of a sampling of the recommendations. There are many more than this. Each subcommittee has made a number of recommendations, but just in the interest of time, we're sharing a selection of them here. As I said, go to the website and take a look at so that you can see the rest. And we're happy to answer any questions on any of them, but just in the interest of time and giving you the most time possible to speak, we're just going to talk about these in our presentation. 3 is a suggestion that a policies and procedures review board be formed, and that can be overseen by the police accountability department, and that it report to the oversight committee. There's also, and this is something that is still a work in progress, and we'd love to hear your opinions on this. One of the suggestions is that the members could be appointed by the mayor and/or city council members. Members of the public could apply. It also might include staff, city staff, perhaps someone from the city council's office or the assistant city manager, someone like that. And of course, we want to get a cross section of the community, taking into consideration race, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, age, etc. And also location within the city would be very important to get a cross section of the entire city. Currently, as laws change, police department policies have to change. And a lot of smaller cities rely on private companies that exist to keep track of the laws and provide suggested updates, policy and procedure updates to the cities. And this would be just a way of making sure that those obviously are sort of geared toward the largest audience possible, because of the fact that they're coming up with solutions, policies, and procedures from many different cities. We want to have a chance to tailor those policies and procedures to Alameda, and this is a way of doing that. So with that, we'll put the next question up on the board for you to vote on.
Great. Here we go. It's recommendation 3, a policies and procedures review board could be formed, overseen by both the newly formed Police Accountability Department, reporting to the Citizens Police Oversight Committee. Do you think recommendation 3 is on the right track? And we'll give it like 8 more seconds to lock in your votes. And I'll go ahead and stop the polling now. And here are the results. Strongly agree has the most votes, less support than the last one. Somewhat agree is second for this one as well. Thank you all for participating too. All right, back to you.
All right. And if we can go to the next slide. We recommend that Alameda Police Department require mental health and de-escalation training on an annual or semi-annual basis. So this is obviously an extensive slide. It captures a lot of what is written in the recommendation. Just to summarize it, a lot of time is spent with police training on what they call or refer to as perishable skills, and these are skills such as firearms training and use of force, because obviously if you don't practice these skills, then you can lose them. And police officers don't need them often, but when they need them, it's important that they be able to perform them well, because the safety of the community or the safety of the officers, as well as the safety of people who are being policed, depends on them. As we're all aware, in recent years, police forces have become more and more militarized, and an unfortunate side effect of that is that they're spending more and more time on training in these perishable skills. What we'd like to do is refocus some of those efforts so that in addition to that sort of training, mental health and de-escalation training is something that's done on an annual or semi-annual basis. Right now, that's training that's done in the academy, and it's not something that's repeated. There might be a couple of opportunities after the academy, but it's not something that's required on an annual or semi-annual basis. And we think it's important that be required on such a basis, because it is actually, if you look at the calls that APD receives, it's the most common work that they do. They're dealing with mental health crises, with homelessness and other things like that. Those are most of the calls that the officers respond to. So if mental health and de-escalation training is conducted on an annual or semi-annual basis, it gives the officers the tools that they need to deal with those situations. And it also makes them aware of how important it is as a value of the community. And with that, I'll just, I guess we can put up the next question and get people's opinions on that.
Great, thank you. So here's recommendation 4, and somebody had asked if these are anonymous, and they are. When I created the poll through Zoom, there's a box to check on every question that keeps it anonymous. So that box has been checked on every question. Recommendation 4 is we recommend that APD require mental health and de-escalation training on an annual or semi-annual basis. So we'll give this one about 5 more seconds. And we'll go ahead and end polling. And here are the results. Strongly agree, had 63% of the votes on this one. And I also see that somebody has their hand up, and I just wanted to remind folks that you can enter your questions and comments into the chat box, and we'll go ahead and do the Q&A after the presentation.
Okay, the fifth recommendation is that the city add a full-time crime analyst position, and that would help to expand the statistical and data expertise of the Alameda Police Department. In this modern age, data is an important part of policing. The more that you know about the stops that are happening, the more you're able to tailor your policing to the needs of the city and the needs of the community. This would also allow us to respond more quickly to requests for public information, and also just when the police are accountable to the city council, it would give more information when the city council answers questions, and also just would give the community a way of measuring whether or not the police are upholding the standards that the community thinks are important. And with that, I think it's time to take our vote.
Great. So here is the polling for recommendation 5, add a full-time crime analyst position and expand the statistical data expertise of the Alameda Police Department. Please go ahead and answer the poll on recommendation 5. We'll give it about 10 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the polling and share the results. This one is tied for strongly agree and somewhat agree as the top 2. Thank you for that.
All right, now on number 6, and this is just a more general one. As you are probably aware, the city of Alameda is currently in the middle of a search, or beginning a search really, for a new police chief. And so the committee just wanted to express, and we've had the opportunity at this point to give opinions on this, but we're looking for a police chief that's committed to reform, and in particular to rooting out bias and the use of excessive force in policing, and committed to creating a department characterized in its policies and culture by diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're hoping that in that search, the search committee will pay special attention to candidates that are traditionally underrepresented in police chief positions. With that, we're ready for the vote.
Great. Here we go. Recommendation 6, hire a police chief committed to reform and in particular to rooting out bias and use of excessive force in policing, and committed to creating a department characterized in its policies and culture by diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we'll leave this one up for 8 more seconds or so. And I'll go ahead and stop the polling and share the results. So strongly agree, somewhat agree, definitely higher over the other ones. And I'll stop sharing.
All right. Recommendation number 7 is to advance a dynamic and robust annual assessment of community needs conducted by individuals outside of APD using service call data, police dispatch and outcome data, and surveys of Alameda residents and visitors, and other community outreach modes. So as I said at the beginning, an important part of reforming the police department is increasing the amount of interaction or information exchange of information between the police department and the community. And this is a way of doing it. And this is sort of number 7 that we're showing here to you on the board is sort of a catch-all for a number of recommendations were made by different committees, a couple of different committees, with the idea being that we want to hear from the public. And traditionally, the folks that the police department tends to hear from are the folks who have some means and who are aware of and unintimidated by the idea of speaking to the police or speaking to those in power. We want to make sure that we're hearing not only from those folks who benefit from the most from policing, but also from the folks who are policed. We think that all of our police officers obviously want to do the best that they can, and the more that they are aware of the concerns and the experiences of all members of our community, the more effective they can be. And that was, I guess, it's ready time for the poll now.
Great. So the poll is up for recommendation 7, advance a dynamic and robust annual assessment of community needs conducted by individuals outside of APD using service call data, police dispatch and outcome data, surveys of Alameda residents and visitors, and other community outreach modes. Go ahead and take 6 more seconds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the polling and share the results. Strongly agree as the number 1, 57%, and 26% for somewhat agree.
Okay. And recommendation 8, enhance existing citizen feedback mechanisms to add an anti-racism reporting feedback tool for residents to report instances of prejudice, abuse of power, and racism that they witness. So this is something that applies not only to the police department, but also other city services as well as experiences within the city itself. As we can all tell by what's happened in the public and the public response to the things that have gone on in this country in the last year, as people hear these stories and become aware of these stories, that's what prompts change. So the idea of this reporting and feedback tool is that as the larger community is aware, the larger community will become concerned, and it will become a priority for the city to deal with these issues, whether they be, in retail or within the police or within some other city service. The idea is that as this is formalized, the data can be assessed annually. We can use an outside service to do it. The information would be made available to the police services as well as other services. the retail and business community as well. And it would give additional information. Obviously, the more information, the better off you are, and the city could use this information as necessary to amend its policies and procedures in the police force and otherwise. And I think we're ready for the vote.
Great. There's the poll. This is for recommendation 8 to enhance the existing citizen feedback mechanisms, to add an anti-racism reporting or feedback tool for residents to report instances of prejudice, abuse of power, and racism that they witness. So we'll do 8 more seconds or so. All right, I'll go ahead and end the polling and share the results for our last one. Strongly agree, 61%, the highest vote getter.
All right.
And
Thank you.
there we go.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say, I'm going to turn it back over to Christine.
Thank you, Al. Thank you, Sarah. So as you see, this is one of several presentations that we are going to be delivering to different forums in this city. So we just wanted to let you know what, if you wish to join another meeting, here they are. And also just to let you know some additional work that's going on. So there is a survey that launched with regards to the draft recommendations that launched, I believe, today or yesterday. And that is going to be open through the 14th. So this is an opportunity for us to share with you. Please go to the city website, take the survey. Sarah can tell you a little bit more about how it's been put out, but also not just you taking the survey, but please share this with people you know. It's a goal for us to get this out to as many people as possible who maybe are not joining these Zooms or who do not receive city updates, or maybe are not on Facebook. We want as many people from all over the island and off island who visit the city to take this survey. So again, Sarah can share with you in a moment where you can find the survey. Additionally, once we get the feedbacks, we will be reviewing that work, and at some point we will be doing another presentation to the city council, on this work. And once that is done, the work of this particular group will cease, but that does not mean that this work is over. Far from it. In March 2021, the group that is currently working, steering and subcommittee, will conclude as it looks now, and this work will most likely open up in a fashion that we do not know yet, but we hope that this work will be continuing with some of the same people, with some new people, and in a new format to move this work ahead. As I mentioned in the beginning, this was just the beginning of this work. It is not the end, and the goal is that this work does not end, but that it continues, and that it continues in a permanent position within this city. But as I mentioned, this particular work will just cease this particular grouping will cease in March. And for anybody that came on late, the recommendations that you saw are by no means the final recommendations. We were giving overarching themes that a lot of committees had as part of their draft recommendations. But I believe the draft recommendations in their entirety, the link is in the chat, and they are on the city website. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Sarah to give you a little bit more detail about where you can find this and how you can share it, and then we will go to questions.
Great, thanks, Christine. I'm just gonna share my screen and go to the city's website so that you can see it. This is gonna stop your screen sharing, Christine, it looks like. I think that's okay. All right. Okay. So this is the city's website, and I got to this page. There's a shortcut, alamedaca.gov/policing. You can also type police reform in the search and it'll take you to this page. And this page has a lot of information on it. So first of all, it gives a description of the different subcommittees, has a PDF of the recommendations from all 5 subcommittees. You can go into each subcommittee. You can click this button here to view their individual recommendations. You can see their committee goals. You can see their subcommittee members. So lots of information in here. And then I just wanted to note that there's also a steering committee accordion you can click on to get more information and previous updates. This is a long list of all of the work that's been done to date on these efforts. And so all of the links take you to different press releases and things like that. So a lot of information on this page. I've started to put in the news for articles that are coming up. You can sign up for email updates specific to this work and we'll send those to you. And this link is to share your feedback. So this will take you to the community survey, which is right here, which we've had over 100 people take already today. And this is the survey. So it's 3 pages. It takes you to the first page is general questions. The second page is questions specific to the recommendations. And then the third page is some optional demographic questions. Actually, all the questions are optional. You can answer the ones you like. And I think that's it. So I guess I can start with the questions if you'd like. Jolene, did you want to talk about
Yeah, no, I just thought it'd be great to take a moment and just do a quick round of introductions for everybody on our amazing subcommittee. So if that's cool, can we do that?
Yes.
All right. Sarah, you have a list there, no? You want to run through it?
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. I hope I have everybody. Well, of course, we have Al Mant, Cheryl Taylor, Christine Chilcott, and Jolene Wright, our amazing steering committee members. From Unbundling, I don't know if you want to say hi so people can see who you are when I call you out. So Unbundling, Deborah Lewis Mendoza is here. She has a celebration horn on her. I don't know if folks can see that. Hi, Deborah. Aaron Frazier is here. I don't see Lynn Cunningham here, but Beth Kenny is also. Oh, Lynn is here. Hi, Lynn. I'm sorry. Let me make you a co-host so that you can unmute yourself if you like. Hi, Lynn. Good to see you. And Beth Kenny is also here from Unbundling. I don't see Beth waving, but she must be on a different screen. Policies and procedures, we have Al Mance here, who you met earlier. Decriminalizing survival, I have Amy Liu is here tonight. Amy, if you want to wave, hi. Accountability and oversight, and I might be missing some folks, and I apologize if I am, but I have Sean Cahill here tonight, and I see Sirkan and Jennifer Rakowski, and Melody Montgomery. And systemic racism, I have Heather Reed is here tonight, Hannah Gross, Andrea Carlis, and Bessie Obote. I said that wrong, I'm sorry. I think I got everyone, Jolene. Okay, so I guess I'll just go right into the questions, and steering committee members or subcommittee members, I'm not sure how you want to answer them, but we'll get right into things. So the first question that came in earlier tonight asked the following. The policies and practices starts by saying that they are inexperienced volunteers. Why not choose folks that have experience in these issues? Some of these recommendations have been studied time and time again and shown to be ineffective. It's concerning that elementary recommendations have been included.
I'm happy to deal with that one. When we say we're inexperienced, what we're referring to is the fact that most of us are not in law enforcement. I'm on that committee. I'm an attorney. I've actually been a public defender for close to 18 years now, so I have extensive experience with criminal justice issues and with dealing with the populations that are policed. I also obviously am a Black man who's had extensive experience being policed. So what we wanted in this circumstance, if you take a look at the recommendations, you'll see that one of the things that we repeat is that the city needs to fund this and to have some of these issues looked into or honed by professionals in the area. However, we wanted folks who have real world experience with this. We've spent a great deal of time doing the research. Most folks are professionals, and we actually have members of law. We have a number of attorneys, and we have members of law enforcement, either former or presently, who are on the committee as well. So we did not, when we say that we are, don't have professional experience in this regard, we just want to be very plain that we are not in law enforcement. We've asked questions. Perhaps the person asking the question was, I'm not sure if they were or were not, at the 7 hours of meetings that we had with APD, with the chief, the 2 captains, and also with other members of APD who were responsive to the questions that we had, but we've actually spent quite a bit of time educating ourselves. I would disagree with the idea that some of these notions are elementary or simplistic and that they've been rejected in the past. Also, every city is different. The city of Alameda has about 88,000 people. And so what doesn't work in New York City might work for Alameda, because this is a city in which every voice can be heard. And so we think that what we've come up with is effective. We're happy to listen to any input. We want to include as much input from the public as we can. So if you don't think that some of these ideas work, if you have different ideas, we are more than open to you giving those to us. That's why we're coming to you now, as opposed to with a policy that has already been created. This is your opportunity, so I hope you'll take it.
Thank you. And I just wanted to recognize also Jim Myers is here from Policies and Procedures. Jim, I don't know if you want to give a wave, but hi, sorry I missed you. Okay, the next question. Did the Policies and Practices Committee consider how unsuccessful the 8 Can't Wait methods are? As in many cops violated these policies and killed Black people in cities where these policies were still in place.
I'm not exactly sure what the intention of that is. 8 Can Wait is, in my opinion, a starting point. There are some useful suggestions to be discussed. It's certainly not the be-all, end-all, and it's not necessarily the case that each of those would work for our community. I think there are some valuable things there. They are, one of the upsides to them is that they're very easy to understand, and that an officer who is on the job can be aware this is permitted and this is not. So I think that is one of the values. But I agree that there are problems with the. It's not a perfect set of recommendations.
Thank you. And I just wanted to also recognize Meredith Akers, also here, and I missed her in the beginning, but I think she was waving when we were doing introductions. So thank you, Meredith. The next question, to the Unbundling Committee, the first recommendation is very vague. Can someone on this committee please clarify what would be considered necessary and who decides?
Deborah, unless I can start, and then maybe you want to chime in, and Lynn and Beth too. So that's a great question. We think, I think the first recommendation, I think sort of the starting point is we talked about this a lot in our committee, and
let's read that recommendation.
Oh, great, good point. Thank you.
I just pulled it up. It says Alameda Police Department staffing and budget should be maintained only at the level necessary to properly prevent, respond to, and investigate crime. That is, the activities that require the training of a police officer.
Thanks. So I guess I don't want to dodge the question by saying I don't understand what necessary means, but I think, we can think about examples. At least that's the way I think of it as a construct, right? For example, I will give 2 examples that are very personal. This summer, I was bored out of my mind. I have 2 kids. I needed help. We bought a travel trailer, and I needed to park it on the street. Well, Alameda doesn't allow that. You need to get a permit. Who do you get the permit from? You get the permit from the Alameda Police Department. So there may be a lot of really good reasons why you would get a permit from the police department, like they're open 24 hours and that sort of thing. But it's also another thing, like an officer had to come and meet me at the headquarters and at 11 o'clock at night and take time away from whatever he was doing. So it takes time. The idea is it takes time away from what police is really supposed to be doing. And I'll give you another example. So I had my truck stolen from my driveway, which has happened to a lot of people in Alameda recently, right? And so when you're writing time is finite, and I think resources are finite. And sure, we wish we had enough money to have all the cops solving all the crimes, but I think as that's not a reality, it makes sense to sort of unbundle, take things like that the police don't need to perform, and have someone else perform those so that they can focus on crime, focus on solving and preventing crime. Hopefully I haven't embarrassed our committee. I'll let my other committee members speak.
Deborah gave you a thumbs up, so did Al. All right, the next two questions, well, the next question is asking if the meeting's being recorded and will it be made available to view at a later time? And the answer is yes, it'll be on that police reform page on the city's website, as well as on the city's YouTube page. And then the next person asked if the survey is anonymous, the survey that we have on the recommendations, and yes, it is absolutely anonymous. There's no IP address tracking, nothing is tracked. It is just the answers, and it is 100% anonymous. The next person has a comment. They just wanted to say that they are not in favor with the way that the committee was chosen. They said that 30% disagreed with the way the committee was appointed. And I just wanted to note that comment. And then the next question is asking, why are cops responding to mental health calls and homelessness situations? Aren't there other trained professionals that cost much, much less?
Yeah. I'd like to respond to that, and I'd like Beth, if she could also help. Yeah, our committee has spent a lot of time looking into this situation and this type of response, and we've looked at models that are happening as close as San Francisco and also in other places. And I think that's one of the like strongest like recommendations that we have arrived at together after looking closely at the calls for service, the budget, and the type of care that people in mental distress need, and how that type of encounter can also often, fortunately in our city has not happened, but it can be lethal. And so we need to take this situation very seriously. Beth?
Yeah, this is one of those things like Erin talked about and Deborah talked about. We looked at the calls for service, and there are things on there that are not crimes that because the police are available 24 hours, they have been tasked with. And that has not been beneficial for the community and really for the police either. And this is one of the major issues that we're looking at in wanting to find a way to have mental health clinicians respond to mental health crisis.
And I also like to invite Amy to speak, because I think this intersects with her subcommittee, which is laws that criminalize survival.
Right. So Deborah and I have been talking because there's quite a bit of intersection between these two issues, right? You have, and our committee is it's titled The Laws That Criminalize Survival. We basically look at different issues that intersect with police involvement and with community involvement that we think, like unbundling, could be distributed out to different kinds of caregivers or different kinds of providers. We also look at the idea of, well, many of these calls are coming from citizens who are reporting homelessness or are often responding to an urge maybe to police, right, or to quote unquote to Karen. And so one of our recommendations you can see in our specific document is about a did you know campaign, basically putting together some kind of hub on social media, on some kind of platform to be able to build together a database of, so what do we do in the case of, let's say, for animal control, right? Who do we call instead of the police? What do we do in the case of we want to connect somebody to a shelter? We want to do this, we want to do this. Ways to be able to direct away from the emergency and non-emergency line with APD on issues that we can tackle in other ways.
Great. I just wanted to note that Serena Chen and Emily Langworth are also here, subcommittee members. So if they want to wave to folks, they're both here. And a comment that came in when you guys were responding to the last question, I was just saying that the question was in relation to Al's comments that cops should have extra training because they're responding to homelessness and mental health calls. It seems like the two committees are contradicting each other a bit. I don't know if you want to respond to that comment.
I can just respond quickly to that comment. Even if we have everything in place where we have a separate team at cahoots type model responding, there's still always going to be mental health issues that the cops are going to deal with. They don't know when they're responding to somebody. All sorts of people have mental health issues. They're not mutually exclusive. So there's always going to be situations in which the cops are police have to deal with people who may be experiencing a mental health crisis or people who are unhoused. So they should be trained in how to properly deal with those folks.
And to build on what Beth said, the recommendation for training is there to bridge until we are at a point where we do have trained social workers, mental health workers who can go out and provide these services. Until that force is in place, by default, people call the police. So they need to have the adequate training until there is an alternative response team. And I understand how it seems like it's a conundrum between they need the training, but they shouldn't go out on the calls. But the idea is to provide them the training until there is a workforce in place to respond to those calls.
And to add to both Beth and Lynn, Molly Watkins is a perfect example. The call placed, I believe, was not clear whether this was a mental distress or whether this was somebody intoxicated or it was the person calling didn't know, gave vague descriptions to either one of those. So if the choice is to send out a police because it might be something that would land in the police realm and it turns out that it's nothing, or it turns out that it is mental health, I think you would want your police overly trained to manage those situations. And again, as Al said, de-escalate regardless of what the situation is, and have that training be done regularly so that, again, as the group has said, whether it specifically ends up landing as a mental health or whether it's something else, that the police are using force only when necessary and really practicing de-escalation and support as opposed to any other means.
Yeah, I want to just add really quick to that. I think that, when we reimagine like what it can look like, it's like when somebody's in distress, there can be a variety of professionals that are ready to respond. And I think we need to, wrap our, care around individuals in new and innovative ways, because sometimes having a person come with a gun can actually make things much worse, and in a uniform. So there's models where there's an officer on standby and available when and if needed. There's models where officers are with the other trained professionals, and then there's models where the police come when they're called.
Great, thank you. Next question is asking, what data was reviewed when considering police reform and practices? I don't know who wants to take that one.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming this is a policies and procedures question. I can speak for that subcommittee, not for the others. We started by looking at the policies and procedures of the Alameda Police Department. We looked at the Obama administration's 21st century policing. There was a Pew Research survey where they actually spoke to, I believe, 800 police officers, and they took a survey of 800 police officers. And these are just a few of the examples. We did extensive searches. We did searches. I looked at the Austin Police Department's Police Accountability Board, what their policy is, what the agreement with the officers is, because that's where their policy board is contained. They've actually since made it into a nonprofit. I looked at the documents regarding that, and we had different members who would come to each meeting, bringing different documents and different articles that they would then share with the committee. So there have been a number of different sources that we've looked at, and as we said, it's ongoing. It's a constant learning process. One of the things that we've done is we've looked to organizations that can help us to flesh out these policies, because these are, at this point, these are policy ideas. They're not necessarily written policies. So more work will need to be done. And one of the questions that we're trying to answer is who will be doing this work and carrying it forward.
Great, thank you. Next question says, we know from APD that trainings are expensive due to overtime and costs, and we know from numerous studies that training is not effective in reducing racial bias or escalation. What recommendations might you suggest to avoid a call for more training resulting in an increased APD budget? And how could we ensure that the training we do spend money on results in effective change?
I'll answer that or take a stab at that one. I think part of this goes to the unbundling services. So really analyzing what you need in a police department versus what can be, what monies can be spent elsewhere also allows you to look and determine what funding you do have for trainings. Additionally, as Al and many others said, looking at what are the most effective practices and what trainings have the most efficiency. Nothing is going to be 100%, but what actually works, what would work in our community. And I believe I think it was the number 5 recommendation, hiring a police chief who actually believes in this and institutes this as part of the department's overall culture. So those are not the only things, but I think that's ways that you can really emphasize trainings that mean something and utilizing funds that do not necessarily have to be spent the way they are now if you are looking at carefully unbundling and repurposing funding.
And I'll just, sorry, actually, Sarah, can you repeat the question just so that I don't totally,
Yeah,
my
absolutely.
ears
So,
perked up when Christine said unbundle.
yeah, I'm just going to read, it was some comments in the question too, but I'm going to read the whole thing. That we know from APD that trainings are expensive due to overtime and costs. We know from numerous studies that training is not effective in reducing racial bias or escalation. What recommendations might you suggest to avoid a call for more training that results in an increased APD budget? And how can we ensure that the training we do spend money on results in effective change?
Yeah, Erin, we can tackle this, but I don't think a call for increased training in any way means increased budget. We just have to look at how the money is being spent and reallocate money towards training. And I kind of disagree with that concept. I think there's ways that trainings can be staggered. And I think another thing is, I think a big training cost is that SWAT team, which I think a lot of people feel is unnecessary, and we haven't explored that specifically in our group. So it's a complicated issue. And I think Lynn addressed it too. You know, if there needs to be training, but it intersects with so many other committees, such as who are we hiring? What's our recruitment process look like? And who are we retaining when there's officers who are still on, under their probationary period and they haven't reached tenure and they're on administrative leave? We have options.
Okay,
And
great.
if I could, I wanted to just address a portion of that question. Training cannot necessarily eliminate racial bias, but if you have certain procedures in place that can eliminate at least the appearance of racial bias, which is in many public interactions the most important thing. For instance, if I have a 22-year-old officer who's calling me dude, that's not going to begin a positive interaction, okay? And it might escalate a situation. So if you have the simple training that when you address members of the public, you address them as sir, or you address them as madam, regardless of their age or their appearance or what you might think about their socioeconomic status, that's a very simple piece of training. And that is training that eliminates racial bias, or at least the appearance of racial bias. And sometimes you spend a little bit of money at the beginning and you save a lot of money down the road. Because if you avoid escalating situations, then you avoid the possibility the police officer will be accused of doing something improper. You'll avoid a lawsuit and an expensive settlement. So while you might not be able to avoid to eliminate racial bias, if you just treat people in a respectful manner, you'll eliminate a lot of the problems that result from racial bias.
Somebody posted a comment based when you were talking earlier in the presentation, saying that it's just going to be difficult to find a police chief like the one in your description. And then the next question, we've talked about this a little bit before, so I don't know if we want to go into it or just acknowledge that we've talked about this already. But this person says they're supportive of all the recommendations, but notice many have to do with adding full-time positions within the police department. They're wondering how this aligns with aims for unbundling funds and not increasing funding to the police department. Do you want to touch on that a little?
Some of these would be city positions, I believe. Sorry, Aaron, I did not see you unmute. So by all means, jump in. But I think some of these we had looked at as being city positions, not specifically police department, although they would be supporting police work. And sorry, Aaron, I will let you take over.
No, I mean, that was my thought. I think one position was mentioned in Al's committee's recommendations for a data person. So that may be what the comment or the question is about. But I think, yeah, no, I think I think of it as a net process, which maybe is because I have a hard time. I'm not very smart, so I need to think of the easy way. And I think of it as, there may be, for example, a shift in the type of officer or the type of employee at the APD, and there may be more people hired in a particular department. But if, there's also going to, if the city decides to move forward like we would like them to, there's also going to be, less of a need for a lot of employees at the APD. So I think net, there would be a decline in the number of employees within APD. Still within the city, they would be sort of shifted to other departments, kind of. So that's, the idea, like, are on unbundling, we're all about unbundling, right? And so, yeah, well, we see the other recommendations from other committees. It doesn't make me blink, because I think, okay, yeah, the police should be able to analyze crime, and if they're going to be focusing on crime, they'll sort of having more expertise. I don't know.
Additionally, I would add, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bassi, that certain services that we've talked about unbundling from the police, and I think somebody else mentioned it, homelessness. There's grants that the city is working with now, and state funding that is supporting calls to action when there's a need for homeless support. So it's, some of these things are sort of naturally trying to move away, because we are getting additional funding to hire groups that specifically already work with the unhoused. So there are ways that are already in place and the city is using monies coming in specifically to support this work. And Bassi?
Yeah, if I may, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. If I may, I'm in 25 years into a law enforcement career. And I think one thing, like to follow up on what Ms. Mendoza and Mr. Fraser said, is that maybe the department, Alameda, and I've lived here for 20 years, and I'm interested in making this department as good as it can be. But I think if we're concerned about the amount of money they spend on SWAT training, well, then maybe we have a better SWAT team. But if I want to make them better at community relations, then I need to spend the money there. And I think where we spend the money matters. And maybe, do I want them any less safe? No, I don't. But do I want them more capable in other areas? Yes, I do. And so I think spending money on anti-bias training and spending money on diversity and inclusion training, I think if you want a highly trained and effective police department, you have to spend the money. And there's not really a way around that. How effective are those trainings? I think research shows that you can't eliminate racial bias, but you can raise awareness. And the officers, if someone's got racial bias in their character, you can't eliminate that. But if you can make them aware of it and make sure that it doesn't affect them in their employment. So there's just some of the things I've thought. And having been on the SWAT team in my agency, I was really good at what I was doing there. And now I've got different skills and I'm working on different skills. And I think where we put the money in our police training is where our officers are going to shine, and we want them to shine in a certain area, then we should put the money there. So thank you.
Thank you. A bunch of comments I'm going to read. One person said that their understanding is that they would be civilian positions as well, not all officers. Another comment that says, I guess it doesn't matter to me whom they report to, but the need for police to represent healthful relationships with the public. Another comment that says we cannot have accountability if we don't have good data and analysis. And another comment that says the draft is comprehensive and shows in-depth research and thoughtfulness. Resources were well researched. Other jurisdictions, programs, and assessments were evident. I was very impressed with the breadth of the draft report. Congratulations to all those who participated in its creation, and in all caps, thank you. And the next question is, has any focus been given to how APD will handle calls where attempts to weaponize the police against people of color for simply living their lives happen.
I can start with that. I mean, that's the ultimate aim of our committee, the laws that decriminalize or criminalize survival. And so one of the recommendations initially that we covered was on the topic of fines and fees, which we recommended that, you know, and this is the importance of data, that we take specific aim and specific looks into how fines and fees, specifically traffic fines, right, towing fees. And we had a man, Mr. Shabazz, who wrote a really, really brilliant article about this in the East Bay Times, how they really affect BIPOC communities and residents in Alameda. And we absolutely want to take into account that criminalization is not necessarily, right, specific relating to something that, you know, goes all the way up to the courts, or is something that's escalated far into kind of the realm of the police department, but can often happen in our streets. And so we are open to many other kind of, you know, hearing about different avenues and different ways that the spread of police involvement kind of circulates through Alameda. But our goal as a subcommittee, and I think as a group, is to recognize the long and kind of, right, kind of withstanding auras of police influence and restrict it down. And obviously to protect BIPOC communities in our city.
Sarah, I think since he was quoted, is Rashid still here?
He was earlier. Let me look for him. Nope, I don't think he's here anymore.
Oh, left us. Okay.
Looking for the
No.
article too. Does anyone, Amy, do you have a link to that? I was going to post it in the chat.
I can find one.
Okay.
I was just looking at it.
Great. So the next question is asking if you can share the data that you use to make these recommendations. And I know that we did have a document that listed all of the public requests for information. We'll post that document up on the city's website. And if folks did want to see a particular piece of information that was on that document, we could share that. I don't know for the steering committee if you want to answer that in more depth. Okay.
Well, I know that our committee is working on a more thorough recommendation. And as part of that, we have attachments, and we're going to attach every single public records request that we made, as well as cite all of our research and list all of the meetings that we've had and our interactions with the community at large. So did I answer that correctly?
Yep, that's great. I
And
saw a thumbs up emoji.
And I think another point on the Police Accountability Committee, a big piece of accountability is following the evidence where it leads. So our committee had an ethos that we wanted to find oversight that fit Alameda and understood the specifics of the problems as they exist in this particular city. So it wasn't just making requests for data, it was then looking at that data, analyzing relative risks for different community members. And so really then modeling what we want in an oversight body. We want complaints to be evidence-driven, factually based. So there definitely will be, from our committee, as well as I'm sure all of the others, more sharing out, not just of the raw data, but then what conclusions the different committees drew from the data we gathered.
Thank you. The next person had a comment saying that they find it a disservice to hold such an important community forum with only 24 hours notice on a Friday evening on the Sabbath and during a dinner hour. They say that the city can do better. And I just wanted to note that we did announce this forum on January 15th, and that this is just the second in a series of presentations that are happening with the steering committee. And a list of those presentations are up on the website that I posted a link to in the chat. And we're also on the slideshow that the steering committee presented earlier. The next question is asking, why can't the police be a point of contact for a myriad of issues?
I'm not exactly sure what they mean by that. The police currently are a point of contact for a myriad of issues. And if I'm remembering this correctly from a few years ago, I think that it was said that the LA County Sheriff's Department was the largest provider of mental health in the state of California, which I think is a travesty and an embarrassment. So the police academy is about 6.5 months long. And then there's another 5.5 months of field training before an officer is considered a fully empowered sworn officer. There are only so many tasks that they can learn to do and situations they can learn to deal with in that amount of time. And so one of the ideas behind unbundling is that the services that the police are asked to provide are consistent with the services that the police have been trained to provide and that they have historically provided. Right now, Alameda, and this is something that I learned at one of our prior forums with the police leadership, there are 88 sworn officers, down from a high of, I believe, 105. So they're doing less with more. And as we know, with each passing year, they're asked to do more and more. So we're trying to allow the police department to be effective at the things we need them the most for, while perhaps taking those other tasks and using the grants that are available, and the most recent data that's available and the new programs that are available within the state to have those other tasks fulfilled by other organizations. I'm just saying this anecdotally because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the Cahoots program is one that's often spoken of. It exists in Eugene, Oregon, and they responded to 24,000 calls, and this is folks that these were calls to the police or to 911 that were shunted to other organizations. In a given year, they respond to about 24,000 calls that would have gone to the police otherwise, and in only 150 of those calls did they need to then refer those calls to the police. So the police are being asked to do lots of things that are not traditional policing. And it's actually quite expensive to have police respond to those things. And so it can be actually a money saver. Or certainly it'll make the police force more effective if they are limiting their activities to the things that we want police to do. And as a community, that's something that we need to determine. It's something that is a subject for conversation in forums like this.
As a follow-up, somebody said that the question was, how are they going to handle calls from racist community members that call the police on Black people for living while Black?
Yeah, so I think Amy tried to answer the question, remember? And did you hear that, Amy?
Yeah, so I was actually talking with this person privately too, but I was saying one idea that we've talked about, and absolutely, we as a committee and as a group of people, I think this is one of the biggest issues that kind of drives our work, right? And it came up in conversation. We were talking about, well, San Francisco recently passed the Karen Act, which makes placing racist 911 calls a hate crime. And that is not something that made it into our recommendations for today, but a sentiment that we absolutely can stand by. And I think something that we can follow in the footsteps of San Francisco for doing. If a city like San Francisco were able to pass and act like that, then absolutely, I believe we should be following its tracks.
The other thing that we actually haven't, we've tossed around in our committee, so it's very beta, right, or maybe alpha or whatever the early stage. Let's say it's half baked. But one idea that we've talked about in our committee, the unbundling committee, is working on dispatch and rethinking dispatch, right? Rethinking, like in other cities, and even in our city, actually, there's 211, right? 211 has a ton of resources. It's actually a really incredible thing. We had this meeting with this lady, and she told us all about 211, and it's really cool. So everybody check out 211. But the point is that there are, if you kind of expand your thinking, there are maybe some changes that could be made to dispatch or to sort of the go-to services line. And so we're trying to think through. I mean, I think that's a really complicated problem, actually. So I don't know that we will be able to solve it, but we're going to try to come up with some ideas for the city manager and staff to explore.
Aaron, I'm going out of order here, but somebody just replied, what is 211? Do you want to give that a shot?
Oh, I definitely think someone else in our committee who's better should talk about it. 211, it's a three, like you dial it on your phone, like just like any, like just like 911. But they are kind of like a hub to provide a bunch of referrals to social services provided by either the city or county of Alameda. And so, for example, for housing, for all sorts of like random resources that are available to people, you dial 211 and you get an operator and you say, hey, I need help with such and such. And they redirect your call or tell you who to call or that sort of thing.
Yeah. 211 is for Alameda County. And it's a phenomenal resource for, as Aaron said, mental health, housing, various assistance programs. And one of the things that we're looking at is all of the calls that come in to the non-emergency number at APD, like 45% are not crime related. So, why are you calling the police? Well, you call the police because they come and they help you. Well, but that's not necessarily what they're trained to do. They're trained to prevent, detect, investigate crimes, solve crimes. And so what we're looking at as a committee is how do you take those calls for help and direct them to other personnel that are trained in that aspect of providing help and that's not crime related.
And I've just posted the 211 Alameda County link in the chat so that everybody can see the services provided.
And if I could just comment really just quickly, in Alameda, both the 911 calls and the non-emergency calls go to the same dispatcher who then has the same resources. And so that's an issue we have talked about. We haven't come up with a suggested solution to that, but I think that just in being responsive to that question, that's an issue. It's a training issue, and it's also a resource issue, what this person feels are available to them. So I think that's something that the city needs to address.
Thank you. Next question, somebody says, we know based on APD's reports that 42% of 911 calls in Alameda are non-emergency. Did the Unbundling Committee consider cutting a specific percentage of funding due to this and or also due to APD's low clearance rates for solving crimes?
No, we didn't come up, did we? No.
And we didn't really look at numbers necessarily. Our approach is kind of to look at it from a bottom-up budgeting. You look at the services that are provided, the calls that are answered, the things that they help with, and redirect those to either other city agency. If it's not crime related, you redirect it to another city agency or an outside agency. And depending on which resources can be redirected, that you no longer have to have that staffing at APD to handle parking tickets, abandoned vehicles. You look at those resources, you direct them somewhere else, and then the dollars go where the functions go. I mean, we didn't say, okay, here's the APD budget, let's cut 40%. Okay, these all things are gone. No, you look at from a bottom-up perspective, what makes sense, the resources go there, and then the funding just follows the resources.
And I would just add this anecdotally. I mean, again, this is a jumping off point. So these are recommendations sort of on the higher level without the specificity of direct dollars attached to it. But part of this is a re-information, re-education campaign to the community. We have these other resources, use these other resources, and really looking at the data once you do an in-depth education to the community about this. I don't think it's necessarily just looking at like, well, 40% of these were for another department or for other places, so you don't need 40% of your budget. I think of it as, what is already existing that people just aren't tapping into. 211, I don't think is utilized quite as much as it could be. I believe there's a number for homeless services, or there will be shortly, that, I only know because I specifically had asked about something that I don't think, the general public knows. So I think part of this is a re-education campaign to the entire community at large. We've had 911 drilled into our heads, and we need to have that drilled out of our heads and have, these other resources very clearly listed that, hey, if I have this issue, this is where I'm going. It is not a 911 thing. And once you do that and really can determine what your budget needs to be, hey, you know what, there's a lot of mental health calls and we don't have those people. That's where you can really start to say, all right, let's put money towards this and really start reallocating it. But I don't think we just lop off a number for the sake of lopping off a number. I think it has to be thoughtful, and the public has to come along on this journey with us so that they really can be re-educated. So we really get a sense of, now that we've re-educated you and it's, whatever time has passed, how many calls is APD getting, emergency or non-emergency, that are actually supposed to live with APD.
And one of our recommendations that was highlighted by Al at the beginning was a suggestion for an ongoing community needs assessment. And so we are, of course, aware of the Social Services Human Relations Board's biannual study. But we think that, basically, we know that the world changes, right? Needs change on a constant basis. And so we think, sure, we could start with re-education, start with calls for service. That's actually where the interim chief of police said you should start. We or the community should start with reallocation. But as time goes on, we think there should be a real robust communication between the city and its communities about what needs are there to sort of do prevention work, do work that we know can help people when they are in need, and just on an ongoing basis. So that sort of gives context to that recommendation that Al highlighted at the beginning, and I think it was a great dovetail, so I just wanted to mention it. But yeah, so we sort of want to start with one thing and then make it self-sustainable and learning as it goes along.
Great, thank you. It looks like I have about 8 or 9 questions in the queue, so we'll definitely go past 8, but we'll do a hard stop at 8:15 tonight, and we'll try to get through as many questions as we can and get to the end. The next is in response to recommendation number 6, and I don't have that in front of me, but this person is saying, how will you measure a candidate's alignment with the concepts put forth? It is easy for an interested candidate to simply espouse the rhetoric and sound good. Maybe that's for hiring the police chief.
I can respond to that. It's I think it's not an easy task. Usually when you're applying for a position as police chief, you have a record in law enforcement, and so we'd be looking to that. And when I say we, I mean the city will be looking to that to determine, what the person's qualifications are. So, we're looking at people who have a track record, so that makes it a bit easier.
Great. Next question, I think for most of the subcommittees, based on your best practices review, where is Alameda falling short?
I'll jump in here. Hi guys, Heather Reed. I'm the chair of the Systemic and Community Racism subcommittee, and just want to quickly say thank you all for being here, and thank you to my team members for being here too. There's an elephant in the room, in my opinion, and that question is the perfect segue. If I could be so bold as to say, one of the things that falls under our purview is messaging and social media. So as you are likely aware, we had an issue about 6 weeks, 2 months ago. Time is relative. You have to forgive me. The issue with the mugshot, and then the issue very recently with the Bayport neighborhood. And my team has identified social media and messaging as a huge glaring.
Oh, Heather, you're muted. You just went muted. We heard almost everything you said.
Okay, Jesus, I don't know what happened. Okay, so you've heard most of it. Sorry. So we have definitely identified social media as a huge a problem for the department. our team has reached out a number of times, and this kind of piggybacks on another question about all the data. Someone asked to see all the data, and I promise you don't want to see that because we've been doing this for about 6 months, and there's a lot of back and forth, and there's a lot of data, most of which is public, which you can find on the public Google Drive. But I will say that in our exchanges with folks at the department, we have neither been able to discern who is in charge nor their official practices, and quite frankly, they just don't have one. Other departments, such as San Francisco, they do have a social media protocol with which they the parameters are clearly identified. They don't release mug shots of folks who have been taken into custody. It's very clearly outlined. So what we have done as part of our recommendation is submitted that PDF to the city for review in the hopes that they could just implement that process. It's pretty straightforward. It seems like a very easy ask. And the fact that such a small department isn't utilizing this tool very well is, quite frankly, very frustrating. I know probably for some of the community members, you feel the same way. In fact, many of you have reached out to me personally to tell me how frustrating this is. So we hear you, we agree with you. It's a huge racial bias issue. It obviously can lend itself to a heightened sense of fear within the community. It can make people feel artificially vulnerable. And furthermore, there's no monitoring of comments, particularly in the thread that came up on MLK Day, when someone from the department was only answering the softball questions and none of the real valid questions from the community. So one thing that we're hoping to do as far as messaging is concerned is to kind of get in there and really help them implement a proper policies, procedures, and best practices for their use of the very powerful tool of social media. Stay tuned. Hopefully they will take our recommendation and run with it and really kind of put a point person in charge of the messaging, like they've done with Sarah Henry with the city. So thank you, Sarah. And that is a really important, it's an important piece of it. And I know it may sound silly for some folks to say, oh, it's just Facebook, but it really is how we get a lot of our news, especially in this community. And we don't want those threads to devolve into chaos. And I think it's very important from an egalitarian perspective that we have comment moderation and appropriate use of the tool as far as what information is shared and in what fashion, et cetera. Does that answer one of those questions? Okay,
Yep,
cool.
that's great. And then actually the next question dovetails off that. So this person says there are some recommendations about use of social media by APD, but what kind of oversight and recourse should the city have if an individual officer is found to be supportive of white supremacist ideas, especially one in a position of power in training younger officers? Free speech is one thing, but these people carry guns and work in our community.
Okay, so I could not agree more with that being a huge issue. I don't know that it does mention social media, but I think it's a bigger question, a very valid question. And, you know, if you're asking for my personal views, and I'll speak only for myself and maybe a handful of folks on this call who would agree with me that should absolutely be rooted out as far as a zero tolerance policy. I want those people out of here. I don't want them in charge of anything. And I don't feel like we have to be both sidesing that or fair in any way. I think that is a huge issue with the Old Boys Network. And I think that, you know, one of the earlier questions was referencing why are we recommending things that seem so rudimentary? And that wasn't a direct quote, but that was how I took it. And you would be surprised how little APD has implemented any sort of current practices that most other departments do. And so one thing that we've talked about a lot with our team is that we are fortunate enough to have a San Francisco police officer in our subcommittee. And it's interesting because that's a huge department versus our small department. And on one hand, you'd think, oh, well, if they can do it, we can do it. We're so small. And then the argument can sometimes be made that, oh, well, they're big. They have more people to do that. And I'm kind of the mind that we are a small department. We do have quite a bit of money, and we should absolutely be delegating funding and effort and resources into rooting out corruption, white supremacy, racism, any sort of bad actors. I mean, again, you didn't ask me, but burn it all to the ground and start over, but that's not realistic. So finding the bad actors, identifying the problem, and this might not be the right job for them. And if it is, this isn't the right city for them. And we want them to know that coming in. And I think that kind of goes into who we want to hire for our next chief. So I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but I do think that in no shape or form should anyone who holds those views and operates within that doctrine be in charge of anything, let alone training new officers. And if you have a qualified like citizens oversight committee like we have here, it's pretty easy to spot those folks. And for those of us who are social media detectives, we can find out a lot about people's views on the internet. So I think that's all I got. Anyone else is welcome to jump in.
Just as a quick follow-up, one of the recommendations that we didn't highlight tonight, but that the Policies and Procedures Subcommittee is making, is that the city consider implementation of a code of conduct, and one of the specific issues, or a few of the specific issues, deal with conduct that is racist or anti-LGBTQ, and if that were the case, in a code of conduct, these things are violations of the code of conduct are actionable. So that's one of the recommendations that we have that goes specifically to that issue.
Great, thank you. A couple of comments. The first one, national research shows that these trainings are not effective. I think we're talking about trainings that came in earlier. These questions came in earlier in the comments. This person says, in many cities that had protests for police brutality, those agencies had the same trainings that folks here are discussing. Another comment, this is a great opportunity to rethink policing models. Just as operators can assess for fire, police, or ambulance, can't we assume that certified mental health professionals can be added to emergency response teams? Another comment that says, thank you for the work you are doing. It's hard, but important. And the next question, as long as officers carry guns, they don't have any real incentives to de-escalate. The word gun doesn't appear anywhere in the recommendations, and the word firearm only appears related to the annual training required for firearms, contrasted with soft skills trainings, for example, de-escalation training, which is only required one time. Have there been any conversations about removing officers' ability to use lethal force?
I just want to speak to one aspect of it. When you look at the data in Alameda, one of the things you find is that Alameda police scores actually well on not using lethal force. Now, it also needs to drill down better. It doesn't have good documentation on when a firearm is drawn, or just the fact that it's on the belt carries a certain weight with a community member. So part of the reason is that we were following the data in terms of other forms of use of force, other forms of restraint, were showing up in the data more problematic in Alameda than firearms.
Great, thank you.
And just quickly, state law changed this year. I believe it's SB 230 that deals with use of force. And the Alameda Police Department has updated its policies and procedures to conform to SB 230. And it changes the standard for when use of force is appropriate. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't want to speak to it specifically, but it has addressed some of the issues that are referred to in that question.
Great, thank you.
I want to say, I think that some of like our committee work speaks to that, because if we're going to reallocate services to other trained professionals, then we don't need, so basically, we don't want people with firearms and armed responding to situations where they don't need to. So I think that also addresses that.
Great, thanks. Okay, next question. I see in the report a recommendation to continue the hiring freeze. We have about 30 officers on patrol, which is absurd for a city our size. At what point do you think it's appropriate to lift the freeze? 20 patrol officers, 10? What's the right number?
I don't necessarily know if any of the committees have drilled down to a number, but I want to clarify that, 30 officers on patrol is not 30 officers on patrol at any given time. And if you're talking about, I think when Chief Larry was here, and I think even after he left, and we've had police meetings with the current members of the department, that can be, 5 patrolmen on duty at any given time, covering all of Alameda, including Bay Farm. So just to put it into context, it's not 30 at all moments. It's not usually, to my knowledge, terribly high beyond 5 to 7, and maybe somebody could give more clarity. But also, I do know from speaking with Chief Larry months and months ago that if there's a situation that happens and police are responding to that, and let's say they have to book someone and take them, take them for processing at a jail, that's 2 officers out of maybe 5 or 7 leaving the city. And depending, since I don't think we use Oakland, I think we have to go to Berkeley or somewhere else, that could be 2 to 3 hours of those 2 officers out of the city, leaving a minimum amount of patrol actually working in Alameda. So if any of the committees actually drilled down and came to a number, by all means speak to it, but I just wanted to give some clarification.
Great, thank you. 2 comments that came in. One is saying, can we just acknowledge that the police do not actually prevent crime based on the data? Another comment is saying, rather than train 70,000 people to use new numbers when they're in crisis, why not train a few dispatchers and incentivize them to direct the calls to the right resource? And then somebody asked the question, what would it cost to fund APD to respond to and deal only with crimes and violent offenses? And we are having the chief present at the next city council meeting, so that question could be asked then, but I don't know if anybody here wants to talk to that question.
I'm just going to jump back to the dispatcher training. I think that none of these are in silo. So it's not one or the other. You can do both. And I think, you're right. If people are in crisis, they're going to go for the number they know, but not all of these situations are crisis situations. So if you know that there's a number for homeless services and it's not a crisis, and you know that there's an existing number, by all means, that can be done. So I think these, all of these suggestions are things that definitely can be done in tandem. And that's a great idea for dispatcher training that we can add to the recommendations.
Great. Well, thank you very much. That concludes the questions and the comments that I've gotten in the queue. So we will have more meetings. Look out on the website for those. And quickly, I wanted to unmute the mayor. She wanted to say a few words at the end before I turn things back over to the steering committee.
Hi, everyone. It's Mayor Marilyn Ezzy Ashcraft. I just wanted to thank all of you. Hi. Oh, my goodness. The steering committee and the committee members. I am so impressed. You truly have done the deep dive, and our community is better for it. I look forward to the next steps in this process. But really, to those who are members of the public just listening, this was truly a labor of love. This is all volunteer time, hours and hours and hours, and so much research and discussion and reporting back. Anyway, I am grateful to all of you, and I know I speak for the entire City Council saying thank you so much. And your work is going to provide the foundation for some important steps forward in our community, and we're all going to be better for it. So I am grateful. Thank you so much. Take care, stay safe. Please wear your masks when you're out there, because there's all kinds of safety, and I'm keeping you safe from COVID. Take care, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mayor. And back to the steering committee to close us out.
Christine, you want to take it up?
Sure. So thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight, for asking a lot of really terrific questions. There again, this is just the jumping off point. So your questions, your comments, your thoughts are all very important to the work that we have started. And a lot of this will be added to the recommendations. And if you haven't had a chance, please go to the website and really read the reports. They're much more in depth. We gave you a big overview because we could be doing this for weeks on end and spend several hours just on one committee's one recommendation and really drilling down. So we want you to really take the time when you have a moment to read all of the committee's research and recommendations. Again, knowing this is just the beginning. We're not finished yet. And again, if you have questions beyond this, we do have additional forums coming up where if there's something you didn't think of, you can certainly ask it at another point in time. And we do have our website that you can email the steering committee, and then any questions that we can answer, of course, the subcommittees can. And I will just very quickly put our email in the Zoom.
While you're doing,
make sure.
I just want to say something really quick too, to kind of address some of the bad feelings that were happening in the beginning of the questions about the selection process. This work is not happening in a vacuum. As Christine said, we do have a general email address, and we're your neighbors. Many of you know us in real life. Feel free to reach out to us. All of our names, for better or for worse, are on the website. So if you have if you have a specific question or concern that pertains to our specific scope, and if you think that something belongs under our purview, please do not hesitate to reach out to us with via any channel. And yeah, we're all in this together. So I do appreciate, this is very collaborative, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, and on that note, again, you saw it as a recommendation that we had actually recommended additional boards and oversight committees. So if that is the direction that our recommendations choose to move forward within the city, that is a possibility for joining at that point to continue this work. So with that, if my fellow steering committee members are good, then I will say thank you on behalf of the steering committee, the subcommittees, and the city staff, and all of their work. And thank you for joining us on a Friday night to hear what we are presenting. So good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.